We're live?
Yeah.
Very good. Good to have you back. When you and I reflected the other afternoon, we spoke about the character, the hero of our faith, Moses, leaving Egypt, not belonging to the house of Pharaoh, and certainly not belonging to the Israelites. He found home. Really, he didn't find home, but he found a place to rest in the home of Jethro, the high priest of Midian. Jethro was a Midianite. He came from the Abrahamic line, but he was not an Israelite. And so when God calls Moses in the burning bush, he uses the terms, the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses knew full well what that meant. That meant that the people, the pain of what he experienced in Egypt, he had to return to. God did not take the excuse of the painful memories of Moses, nor did he take the excuse that Moses did not think that he was well versed in speaking. In fact, God even called his bluff. Isn't that great? When God's will be done, he will find a way. When you and I incline a heart, contrite and humble, God will either use or work through our difficulties. So what does God do for Moses? Moses tells him, I am not eloquent. In fact, I have a stutter. God gives Moses another mediator, Aaron. Isn't that much like the will of God? He so loves you and I that he employs many people to help bring us to his heart. So God was going to use Moses lovingly to call the Israelites out of Egypt. And how is he going to use Moses? Through the help of Aaron. Now, as you and I are journeying through Holy Week, I would encourage you to really read what happened during the Exodus account. Read line by line. Now, certain things are very obvious. Other things we have to cross-reference the Bible. When Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, what they do not do is demand the Israelite people be released from slavery. That doesn't come until the end, until the final plague. What do? They implore Pharaoh to allow the people to go 3 days into the desert to have a festival, a feast of the God of Israel. So at that point, the first time Aaron and Moses go to Pharaoh, they implore him, let my people go that they might worship to the Yahweh, the Lord their God, Elohim, Adonai. They want to worship. Now, it's very interesting what happens. Pharaoh's response is, obviously they don't have enough work to do. So he gives them more work. And then he makes that work harder and harder and harder. And you and I can even imagine, what was Moses going through? That cartoon, you ever see that cartoon? The Prince of Egypt? Moses goes to Pharaoh, and you can see, even though it's a cartoon, he has a broken heart. And he begins to sing to Pharaoh, once I called you brother. Once I thought the chance to make you laugh was all I ever wanted. And even now, I wish that God had found another. Serving as your foe on his behalf is the last thing that I wanted. This was my home. All this pain and devastation, how it hurts me inside. All the innocent who suffer from your stubbornness and pride. I would encourage you to watch that cartoon. If you don't have time to read the whole book of Exodus, then watch the cartoon, Prince of Egypt. Anyway, we get back to Moses. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and they implore him, let my people go. And it's interesting. We lose so much in thousands of years of translation, but the people at the time would have known what every plague meant. The plague of the Nile, the water turning to blood, that was an insult into one of the major gods of Egypt, the god of the Nile, Hapi. Hape. God is going to demonstrate to Pharaoh and to every other nation that Israel is his firstborn son, and there is no God like the Lord our God, Hapi. The next plague insults the god called Heket. Heket. The plague was the frog coming upon Egypt. And not only the frogs, but the death of the frogs. Heket was the god of frogs, and among many other things. Also to Geb, okay, the plague of dust of the earth. Geb was the Egyptian god of the earth. When people wanted to pray for a good harvest, they would pray to Geb. They would also pray to what they considered the Egyptian god of creation, Khepri. The movement of the sun had to do with Khepri. So the swarms of locusts, or the swarm of flies, the fourth plague, was an insult to the god Khepri. Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of love and protection, that was employed when God destroyed the cows and the livestock. God was also insulting another, or demonstrating how the Egyptian god Apis was not powerful. Apis is the god of fertility. Isis. Isis was the goddess of medicine and peace. When God turned the Egyptian flesh to boils and gave everyone skin conditions, you can see our God is destroying Egyptian mythology. Nut, the god of the sky, when God rained down fire and brimstone. Seth, the Egyptian god of storms and plague, locusts were sent. And Ra. Ra was the sun god. And what does God do to demonstrate how inept, how non-existent Ra is? He sends 3 days of darkness. And finally, the plague of death. The plague of death is to demonstrate how Pharaoh, who is considered a god, is not. The death of the firstborn son. Now, again, somewhere in the dialogue and in the plagues, the heart of Pharaoh is softened. I believe it's Exodus 5:24, 5:25. I'd have to open up my Bible to find out. But at one point, Pharaoh finally tells the Egyptians, you may have your festival to honor the Lord your God, but you may not go. You may not go out. You must have it here. Now, I find the dialogue very interesting because Moses and Aaron look at Pharaoh and they recognize having the festival of Yahweh, Adonai, Elohim, having the festival of the God of Israel in the city or in the cities of Egypt are not good enough. Now, you and I have to read between the lines. And where do we find a good cross-reference? Ezekiel 20. Ezekiel 20, Ezekiel the prophet, is speaking to the Israelite community, and he is warning them to avoid the I word. Do you know what the I word is? You know, you and I have some very bad words in our language, and some words are so bad that instead of saying the whole word, all you need to do is say the first letter of the word. Well, for the Israelite people, there was one bad word: idolatry. Ezekiel 20 gives you and I the reason why God wanted to take the people 3 days out of Egypt. Idolatry. You see, Ezekiel tells the people that the Israelites were in Egypt for so long that they began to worship the idols. What were the idols? The animals. Inanimate objects. Idolatry. Idolatry. And even if we didn't have Ezekiel to read, when finally the people are delivered out of Egypt, what do they keep going back to? Idolatry. Idolatry. There are many reasons why we have the word kosher for the Jewish diet. One of the reasons why the Jewish people do not eat anything that is pork affiliated is because in Egypt, what did they eat? They ate the flesh pot of pork. When they are leaving Egypt and they are walking in the desert for 40 years, they actually complain to Moses, we had the flesh pot in Egypt to eat. What was the flesh pot? Again, it was the pig. Even the Egyptians knew you don't worship the pig. So therefore, what's the one thing that they cannot eat anymore? The pig. So anyway, we get back to Ezekiel. Ezekiel tells the people, do not be like the Israelites prior to the Exodus. What were they doing? They were following the idols of Egypt. Again, read between the lines and read the lines very carefully. And then read Ezekiel 20. The people who were called by God got into the habit of either being lazy, they got into the habit of forgetting, they got into the habit of neglecting the fact that God called them to be a firstborn son, a firstborn daughter. What a great analogy for our time. What a great analogy for our time. It is not always what we eat, but rather what is eating us. Jesus says, where your treasure is, there is your heart. You and I, again, are going through a very unique moment. We're going through a very unique moment in the world, in our country, but also, too, in the family of faith. What I love about Lent is much like a rock turner. Have you ever seen a rock turner? You turn it up, you put a whole bunch of rocks in it, and many of them come out smooth. They're not meant to crack. And so too, Lent is meant to be that time for you and I, where God is turning our heart, turning our minds. Really, for you and I today, I would implore us to wonder, what are we eating that is eating us? What are we consuming that is consuming us? God provided a miracle thousands of years ago for the Jewish people. He provided a miracle. The 10 plagues of Egypt demonstrated that nothing, not even the Egyptian gods, can stand anywhere near the magnanimity and the love and the power of the Lord our God. When you and I are in battle, we want to be on a winning side. God knows how to claim the victory in your life and in my life. It's very painful as a pastor that we are not doing Mass or confessions publicly. It really is very painful, and it's very heartbreaking. On Monday, it would be the diocesan day for confession. It would be the diocesan day for confession. And very often, confession is a sacrament that, for whatever reason, people run away from. I love the excuse, well, Father, if I come into confession, the doors of the church, the walls of the church are going to fall down. My response will always be, let's find out. I dare you. I'll make you a bet. $10. If the walls of the church fall down after hearing your confession, I'll give you 10. If they're still up there, you give me 10. God provided a way for the Jewish people to move from sin into freedom, from slavery into freedom, from addiction into freedom, from darkness and loneliness into freedom. Who has a right to freedom? Sons and daughters. So my dear friends, among all the beautiful titles we might have, among all the beautiful ways people address us, Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, Doctor, if we are not living in the freedom of the sons and daughters of God, something is eating our minds, something is eating our heart. We only have a few days of Lent left. God creatively wants to provide a miracle for you in a way that he has never provided a miracle ever. The plagues of Egypt never happened before and never happened after. And so too, the miracle that God has for you was already written. God already has a beautiful plan for your life. somehow we are called to let our guard down, to no longer be a slave to darkness, loneliness, isolation, but really say, I want to be a son, I want to be a daughter again. When we finally take that step and move forward, we will find a very happy God who will every moment respond, welcome home. Thank you.